Right.
And the craziest thing that we invested in is something called fan-controlled football. Have you happened to bump into this on the internet anywhere in the
I
last few
have not
years?
yet.
All right, this is going to blow your mind. This is the Madden NFL video game with real football players.
Welcome to Clicks and Bricks Podcast. We talk about the entrepreneur mindset.
If you get one shot at this, what kind of shot are you going to take?
If we forget who we are, they're going to forget who you are.
And you've got an adversity story that's out of this world.
Everything from that Main Street brick and mortar to that billion-dollar manufacturer.
Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. We're super excited to have you on the show. You're an investor in several companies, but before we get into what you're doing now, can you tell us a story about what led you up to this point in your life?
Sure. I'll start all the way at the beginning. Born in Brooklyn, mostly grew up down in Miami. Went to high school down there. Did my undergrad at University of Pennsylvania and the business school at Wharton. Spent the next 15 years running around in capital markets, investment banking jobs, and a number of cities in the U.S. and over in London for about 3 years, and came back to the States just in time for the great financial crisis of 2007, 2008. Had along the way, I'd married a fine lady who grew up here in Atlanta, and when the world blew up in 2008, she told me it was time to get back to her hometown. So we've been here in Atlanta, Georgia since 2008, 14 years now. Love it here. Raised my two kids here. They're both in college now, and that's the background and personal story.
Awesome. And I just found out that your son's in St. Louis going to school at WashU. So
that is. Yeah,
congratulations on that.
A son who's a sophomore at WashU in St. Louis, and a daughter will be a freshman at Rice down in Houston.
Awesome. Neither one of them escaped the humidity.
No, they have not.
They must like it. Awesome. So, but now you are a venture capital guy.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
Jared?
Well, the big transition for me in 2014, I got the startup bug. So in 2014, I paired up with some guys that I had met in the finance space and went to work at a place called Aquina Health. Aquina Health was a fintech, tech-enabled small business lender in the healthcare space. We lent money to doctors and dentists and home healthcare agencies and mental health providers, all kind of healthcare providers all around the country, generally smaller practices. And we did that kind of tying into some of the medical practice management systems that track their billings to like Medicare and Medicaid and the insurance companies, and built that business up for about 3 years. And we ended up selling it to a larger finance company, to a strategic. Right. And that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, learned a lot doing it. Man, it was hard work, but we had a great time with that experience. So that was my first startup experience.
Right. So I guess the problem you were fixing there was if you're a rural doctor or a smaller doctor and you're submitting payments to the government, we all know how fast the government pays. So this is like bridge and gap loans, short-term kind of turnaround stuff to help those smaller practices keep their head.
You got it. Yeah, I mean,
going.
Whether it's Medicare or Medicaid or even, Aetna or United Healthcare, they take 30, 60, sometimes 90 days to pay a bill. And, these doctors have got expenses from day one. Right. So, yeah, whether you were rural or city, big city, little city, didn't matter. We would work with them all around the country. We had customers in pretty much every state, dealt with thousands of practices over the 3 years there. And that was a great experience. When we exited that or sold a controlling interest to this finance company, I decided I wanted to do something a lot more fun. And those kids that are now in college that I mentioned were big into sports growing up, played a lot of sports. And as a dad, as a coach, as a team manager, as a fan, I saw tons and tons of problems in the youth and high school and travel sports markets. Yes. If you've got kids who have played any of this stuff, it is just a mess. There's so much put on the parents, so much time on the kids. Coaches are overworked. It was just a market that I thought, man, there are so many problems. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to try to fix them. And so I started a high school sports media and tech company in 2017 called Sportal. We launched with a real specific idea. It was called Sportal Space. My kids played mostly volleyball for my daughter and basketball for my son. And we just kept losing access to our gyms. We'd get thrown out at the last minute. We were always scrambling to find places to practice and train. And so Sportal Space was open table to find a gym or field for practice or training for youth sports teams. A couple of people tried to different parts of the country. Pretty simple concept. We got about 100 gyms and fields on the platform. But just ran into a ton of roadblocks at getting scale. The The biggest owner of gyms and fields in any city is the schools. And the schools are controlled by the school districts or the city county that they're a part of.
Right.
And man, Ken, if I live to be 100, I'll never try to sell anything to a school district ever again. They are such tough businesses to work with, bureaucratic, anti-technology, resistant to change, no real person in charge, multi-year decision cycles. It was impossible. So we pivoted the business. We ended up building a media company covering high school sports here in Georgia, sent reporters and videographers out. Hit about 200 games in 2018, all the boys and girls sports, all the major team sports, basketball, baseball, softball, volleyball, football, soccer, and lacrosse. Built a live streaming business. We went out to these games and we'd roll up with a camera person, a producer, and a play-by-play and a color announcer, and we'd blast the games out on YouTube. And man, it was a lot of fun. The students loved us, the parents loved us, the coaches, the administrators, athletic directors, everybody loved it, but no one wanted to pay for it. That was that was the conclusion at the end of all that. We were beloved in the Georgia high school community, but wow, did we have a hard time making money. So I
have some models that work there.
Yeah, I mean, nobody wanted to pay for it, so we were putting it out on free, and we tried to build an audience big enough to kind of bring in the advertisers. And I describe it that we kind of got stuck in this weird middle ground. We were too small an audience and too Georgia specific for the big national players that would be obvious, like a Nike or a Gatorade or a Dick's Sporting Goods. They just, they weren't going to advertise at that level. They're going to do stuff on major ad campaigns nationally. And we were too expensive for Joe's Pizza Shack and Bob's Tire Shop. They would rather spend $200 to throw a sign on the outfield wall.
Absolutely.
We just never figured out that right middle ground. It was a ton of fun. I met a lot of great people. I felt like we made a real impact in the community the time we were doing it. But at the end of 2018, I made the hard decision to shut the business down.
It's a tough call. I had a similar business that I sold. It was my first company I sold. It was a video production company when I was like 22 years old. I went to work for the company but we did high school sports nationwide.
Okay, all right.
We shot them nationwide, but we didn't try to stream. We would sell them the VHS tapes to grandma at the end. So a lot of shoot live, dub it, and then sell the tape right after. So this was pre-YouTube, like by a bunch. Right. I was still in film school at the time. So,
that's wild. Yeah, I mean, look, it was a lot of fun. We really loved being around it. And what ended up happening was I was working with a lot of pro athletes, mostly NFL players, that were helping me with the stuff we were doing with high school football. My color commentator for the high school football season in 2018 was an 8-year NFL veteran named Andre Fluellen. Flu grew up around here in Atlanta, played his college ball for Bobby Bowden down at Florida State, and then played 8 years in the NFL. And he retired, mostly played for the Detroit Lions as a D tackle, retired in 2016, got connected with me. And he was on the mic with us every Friday night, running around to a high school football. And he had a blast. He had so much fun. He'd never done anything like that. And, what he said when we shut the business down is he's like, this is so cool. Startups and technology and venture capital and digital media and social media and advertising. He's like, we've got to show this to my athlete buddies. Nobody knows that this world exists, and we need to tell all my athlete friends. And that was the birth of what we call now Beyond the Game Network, which is a group of athletes and business and finance and tech execs here in Atlanta. It's a place for athletes to come after they retire from their professional sports and help them try to find their second careers or opportunities. You play in the NFL, you wake up, you're 28 years old, you're 32 years old, you're retired. You got to figure out what to do with the rest of your life. It's one thing if you're a first round draft pick or a Pro Bowler and you're making Tom Brady money, but for every Tom Brady, there's 99 guys who have career earnings of a couple $1,000,000, and they got to figure out what to do with themselves for the rest of their life. The NFL churns through so many players. There are close to 30,000 former NFL players living in America today, over 1,000 in the metro Atlanta area.
Wow, that's a huge number. And they're all roughly 1 to 5 millionaires. Right? Yeah. I mean, that's the reality of it. If you're a first round draft pick, you're getting a lot more than that. If you're a Pro Bowler, by the time your rookie contract rolls off in year 3 or 4, then you're going to make a lot of money. But and you look at any given NFL roster, 40 out of the 50 players are making league minimum, which is like $1 million less. And so, the average career in the NFL is about 2.5 years. You can do the math.
the vast majority of people make less than 5 million career earnings. So this is not like, when you see the NBA 10-year NBA All-Star that manages to go broke, that's irresponsible spending.
Right.
There's no way around it.
I mean,
Or bad
football is
investing.
an aggressive sport. It's easy to get hurt, right?
Non-guaranteed contracts, most of the rosters filled by rookies and veteran minimums. And so, guys wake up and they're in their late 20s, early 30s, and they got to find what to do. And so we've created this landing spot where people can come. We have this big belief that athletes make the best entrepreneurs. Whether you're going to start a tech startup or a restaurant or a franchise or some type of home business, the skills life skills you learn being an athlete, picking yourself up when you get knocked down, being focused on the prize, being a good teammate, finding people to coach you and make you better. All of those skills are what is required to be a good entrepreneur, regardless of what kind of entrepreneurial business you want to build. And so, we work with a lot of athlete entrepreneurs in our business and help people find those opportunities, whether they want to lead a business themselves or go work at a small business or a tech startup. We think athletes are just really well suited for that entrepreneurial life.
I can absolutely see that. I've got a couple of friends that are athletes, mostly in combat sports, but they're definitely on that journey right now of what they're going to be doing next. And it's a lot of people out there think, $1 million is this huge unobtainable number, but if you think at 30, 25, 28 years old, you got $1 million check sitting in the bank and no other income coming in, that's a tough life to live, right?
It doesn't last forever,
Right.
I mean, all well and good if you're the number one pick in the draft and you sign a $30 million deal, that's lifetime money. But that's just not the case for most of the folks. And it's not just in football. If you don't make it to the top level of the other sports, it's pretty much the same thing. Basketball is a little bit different economically because there's a lot less players on the roster and a lot more concentration of wealth there. But it's a tough situation. So we work with this big group of athletes and we invest in startups that having athletes involved can really help the company. So 2/3 of what we've done, we've made 20 investments over the last 4 years. And 2/3 of what we've done are broadly in what we call entertainment. So that's anything from sports to media to video gaming, gambling and fantasy sports, and the newest area around Web3, crypto. That's about 2/3 of what we do. And the other third is in fitness and health and wellness and sports training and performance. And so these are all companies where athletes can really make an impact. So the athletes in our group get chances to work with these companies that we invest in as brand ambassadors, making content and promoting products. They help these companies get introductions to the pro and college sports teams that they do business with, or played with, leagues, media groups, players associations. We've got 31 former pro athletes. We can get to some really hard to get to people.
That is awesome. What a great way to find a whole group of synergetic people and put them together. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I can't think of a single company that wouldn't be better off with a celebrity injection.
Absolutely. It always is a big thing. And, look, not everybody in our group's a huge, big household name. And the funny story we asked ourselves when we started is, how many Andre Fluellens that very few people know does it take to equal one Aaron Rodgers or Russell Wilson that everyone knows? More than one, less than 1,000. Let's go figure it out. That was kind of how we launched the business back in 2018. And, what we found is that, that especially for smaller businesses, especially in the, the earlier stages, having an athlete, a pro athlete involved, whether they're a big star or not, it's just an immediate validator that your business is sort of bigger, more legitimate, stronger than it might be otherwise. It means something if you've got a couple NFL players or a former WNBA player, or we've got a woman who ran in the London Olympics. It just means something when those people choose to put their reputation on the line, even if they're not a huge star or a household name or have a massive social following. There's real value to those companies in the early days, that comes from that credibility of having a pro athlete involved.
Right. As entrepreneurs, we put our money and our health on the line every day to run our business. As athletes, they put their body, literally their body, on the line every day to get to the prize, and it should be commended. It's amazing what they do, and a lot of people say, well, they get paid good for it, but they're doing it for us, right? They're doing it so that we can sit on our couch and live glory days through them running that touchdown or whatever they're doing. So I think it's amazing that you've created a home for this very pretty niche market, right? But so talk about niches for just a second. Niches, Riches are in the niches, a lot of people say, and people are afraid to niche down. And you niche down to former NFL players. That to me, like, until you gave me the numbers, I'm like, well, that's a pretty small group, I would think. It's a pretty big group, and you can target them pretty easily. Is that?
Yeah, that's generally the case. And then, when we went from 1 to 5 to 10, it just became so easy to go to 20 to 30. Pre-COVID pandemic, we're really focused on doing these big meetups here in Atlanta, physical in-person meetups. And
Right.
our last one before COVID shut those down had, 100 and something people. And usually at those, there's about 1/3 athletes and 1/3 startup founders and business owners and 1/3 people in kind of the tech and venture capital
Right.
ecosystem here in Atlanta. We were doing them in Atlanta and then also at the Super Bowl site. The last one was the 2020 Super Bowl down in Miami. And, we were starting to think at that point about trying to take those around the country. We had a real successful event at the Miami Super Bowl, which was like in February 2020, right before COVID hit. And, look, there's big concentrations of athletes in most of the major cities. LA is actually the largest for former, metro LA area for former NFL players. Atlanta is actually second. Miami
Right.
and New York are kind of third and fourth. We were starting to think about that, and we really felt like we could build sort of a national network based in some of the bigger cities of both athletes and startups to work with. And we're hoping we can get back to that someday soon, because it really is a big opportunity. And it's not just the 30 athletes in our group, but it's the dozens of startup founders that we can impact. We've talked to make 20 investments. I've probably talked to 2,000 startups over the course of the last 4 years. And even if we're not investing, we always try to find ways to help them out, put them in touch with people, help them find the right investors, because not everyone's going to fit our investment strategy.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that they're not great people building great businesses, and we want to help wherever we can.
I think that is so much fun and such a cool thing to get into. Now, was this a happy accident, like getting the football players in, or was this a strategic move?
Closer to a happy accident probably than strategic. Andre was a former NFL player. We were hanging out every Friday night for weeks on end during the high school football season. And, obviously his friends from an athletic perspective tend to be football players. That's where he spent 8 years of his career. But we didn't really know what it looked like. When we first started it, we thought that the athletes were going to be the ones writing the investment checks into these startups, investing their own cash. We thought they would be the investors. And we just quickly kind of realized that it was just too risky. Investing in startups or small businesses is a risky endeavor. Many of them fail. Most of them fail. And even the ones
one or two out of 100, right?
Yeah, well, hopefully not that bad, Ken. Hopefully 1 or 2 out of 10. But even when they do succeed, your cash is locked up in that investment for 5, sometimes 7, even 10 years. There's no dividends or cash flow or interest on these types of investments, and so it's really risky. And we realized pretty quickly that if you're not dealing with megastars, Tom Brady has an active investment portfolio. Well, good for him. He can afford it. So does LeBron James and Steph Curry and Aaron Rodgers and so on. But the vast majority of athletes, we just realized it was too risky. And so that was when we started plugging in people from my business, finance, and tech background to the group. That's where the cash comes when we make an investment. Andre likes to tell the athletes, use your influence, not your income. Put your time, your energy, your reputation up working with these companies that have already been vetted by the business, finance, and tech people. We've already invested. We've already put our capital on the line there. Let the athletes earn sweat equity. Let them earn opportunities to work with these companies without having to pull their checkbook out and write a check. Now, look, some of the guys Andre played with, he spent a lot of his career in Detroit. He played a long career with Calvin Johnson, with Ndamukong and Sue. Both of those guys made over 100 million in their career. And when they want to invest in a startup, far be it for me to tell them not to.
Right, absolutely. But so you've got these ex-athletes that are coming out. They may be millions. They can hold their own financially, but they don't want to put half of it into a startup and lock it up for the next. They need that money to live, right?
Exactly.
So they might do some smaller, different kind of investments that are lower risk. So they're getting sweat equity, but they're now endorsing this brand, right? And
exactly. Yeah, and we work with some great companies that are, really like in line with athletes. Like, again, the craziest thing that we invested in is something called fan-controlled football. Have you happened to bump into this on the internet anywhere in the last 2
I have
years?
not yet.
All right, this is going to blow your mind. This is the Madden NFL video game with real football players. So 7-on-7 arena tackle football with real players who play in the NFL, like Johnny Manziel and Terrell Owens and Martavius Bryant from the Steelers and so on and so on. So 7-on-7 arena football, but fans watching the broadcast have 10 seconds to vote what play the offense runs. Run left, run right, short pass, long bomb, whatever play gets the most votes, they radio that to the quarterback, and that's the one that the players on the field actually run. So the fans control the action, and it is the wildest thing going. We got so lucky. They ended up playing the games here in Atlanta at this amazing stadium they built here in Atlanta, and man, it is so much fun. And one of Andre's teammates from the Detroit Lions took the job full-time with Fan Controlled Football as the head of football ops. Andre is on their weekly live draft show, their football analysis show as a color analyst. We've gotten involved with that group in so many different ways. One of our other athletes helped to bring Todd Gurley, who was a star NFL running back, in as a celebrity team owner. So he's one of the team. He doesn't play in a league, but he's a celebrity team owner.
Yeah.
And
so does this go compete directly with XFL, or does XFL gone after COVID?
Not really. XFL's coming back. They were around, they went away, and then actually The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, helped recapitalize them. They'll be coming back next year. I don't think I don't think Fan Controlled really directly competes. It's not the same. It's not a competitor to the NFL. It's not 11 on 11 on an outdoor field with that kind of vibe, where you're trying to put on a product that goes head to head with the NFL. It's arena football. It's fast paced. It's a wild mix of WWE football and Vegas nightclub.
I was super lucky enough to. I got to announce for the St. Louis Stampede when we had arena football here in St. Louis. So arena football is a ton of fun. So I'm super curious to check this Fan Controlled.
Check it out. They just finished season 2 about a month ago, so it'll be a little while before they're back. But in the fall, they're going to run Fan Controlled Hoops, their first foray into basketball. They're going to play on this crazy TV screen underneath a hard plastic court. So the all of the fan controlled activity, it's going to look like the NBA Jam video game with real people. It's going to be the wildest thing on television. So that's coming in the fall, and then they'll be back for season 3 of football back in the new year. So it gives you a good example for the kind of companies we get involved in. It's really wild.
Right. That's game changing. Absolutely game changing. Right. So that is super fun. One question left on the celebrity football guys. They come on Sweat Equity. Is there like a bolt-in number that they generally get for the Sweat Equity? 10%? You're the name and face, or is that negotiated?
Everything's customized. Just kind of depends when they're getting involved and how early, how active they're going to be. They're not going to end up owning 10% of the company unless they're doing a whole lot of work. Think more like single digits. But real opportunities. We're trying to invest in companies that are, what we would describe as venture scalable companies that could eventually be worth hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars if they're really successful. We're investing in large video game developers. We're investing in these media type companies or properties. We've invested in a bunch of health devices, wearables that compete with the Apple Watch, things like that. So these are companies that could have really, really big outcomes, could be, either sell to large companies or eventually go public themselves. And so, even 1% of a company like that could be worth many $1 million if it's as successful.
I've gotten some pretty big checks out of owning 1% of some stuff in my life.
1% can go a long way, and a company.
Way.
Yep. Yeah. And we've seen some great successes. We've been at this for 4 years. So, some of the companies we invested in that were, pre-launch or early in their process are now doing hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And, I think if it weren't for the tech market selling off as hard as it did in the stock market this year, we might have even had our first IPO out of the portfolio. But now we're thinking more 2023, 2024 before one of those IPOs.
Yeah, we definitely mid 2022. We're in a dip right now. That's a little walk carefully right now. But there's lots of opportunity to have. right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, some of the best, and most well-known kind of tech-related startups of our lifetime have been built and started at times of economic trouble. Everything from Amazon way back in the day to companies like Airbnb, DoorDash, Coinbase. I mean, really iconic,
All in
defining
08, right?
companies. Yep, all started in the
all during
financial crisis or shortly thereafter. It's a great time, and look, I think things set up for that in ways that make sense. The big incumbents in these times of economic distress are going to be cutting people. They're going to be sticking with their core mission. They're not as worried about new areas or being as innovative. They're
Right.
going to focus on what makes money and what pays the bills so that they can keep as many of their employees employed. And so it leaves more room for tech startups to, for nimble startups to jump in there, whether they're tech-based or otherwise, and just sort of nibble at the edges and get a foothold and be in a situation that when the markets get better and funding is more available, and whether that takes 6 months or 18 months or longer, you get a chance to kind of build a nice foothold while all the big companies are cutting back on staff and cutting back on services. So it leaves room for bold companies to jump in, and we're hoping to take advantage of that and help companies that that are trying to do big, bold things here in this difficult time.
That's it for today's show, folks. If you'd like to join my text line community, the number is 314-370-2871. All you have to do to join that text line is send me any question about business or technology. I'll do all the research, and I'll give you an absolutely free, totally unbiased answer. Get to work.